Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So this is yeah, I can hear you better on here.
Cool. That is awesome.
So how did you get into discussing about narcs?
Yeah, so I live with a narcissist. My aunt that I lived with for 5 years was a narcissist. And while living with her, I met a guy online via Twitter, got to know him. And unfortunately, I found out that he was a narcissist after the fact, but I dealt with him for 4 years. And so that's how I kind of started talking about overcoming narcissistic abuse and just dealing with them in general.
Okay. For me, I guess it was kind of a similar situation. My growing up, my parents were narcissists, but growing up, I didn't realize they were narcissists. I knew they were off, but I didn't know, what the terminology may have been or what maybe they were dealing with. And then my first boyfriend was a narc, and that relationship lasted 5 years, like fully, and then off and on kind of for another 5 years.
Mm,
So just dealing with that and discovering like the signs and putting two together and being like, oh, okay, this is what's going on.
yeah, definitely. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that because it's tough dealing with narcissists because they can really damage you, for the long term, like really have a negative impact on their victims. So it's really sad.
Yeah, and your aunt and your situation as well, but luckily we were both able to escape that. So
Yes.
the that's the
Definitely.
upside to that part. How in your relationship with the guy did you realize he was a narc and get out of that situation?
Yeah, so I just realized like throughout the relationship how I felt, and I didn't feel like I was getting fair treatment. I didn't feel like, he appreciated my time and my energy and my effort that I put towards the relationship. I didn't feel like he cared about my feelings. I felt like he always compared me to his exes and even people in general that could have been his other supply,
Mm.
and I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere with him. And what was basically like the straw for me was he basically future faked me, basically saying like we one day would be together,
Mm-hmm.
but it never ended up happening. And I found out that he was already with someone and he
Mm.
was just playing me, making it seem like, yeah, we're going to be with each other. But he already had a girlfriend, which was his new supply, which I don't think she was new. I think she was probably there all
In the
along.
background.
Yes. And so I found out on social media
Mm.
that he was in a relationship, and he tried calling me and asking to come over. I'm like, no, like that's not happening. So that was what made me just finally just cut it off, go no contact. So
I guess for me, like, it's funny you talked about the future part and everything, because for me, like, kind of something similar happened where after like we were on for 5 years, he would like come in and out of my life for like every 2 years, like, oh, I've changed and oh, this and that. And I think we started dating like in one of those years. And we had a talk one day that was just basically like I was tired of it, I was done, whatever. So fast forward like 2 years later, we were communicating this like on a I guess friendly kind of basis, but it seemed like we were going to get back together or whatever. And I found out on social media that he had a girlfriend, and when I kind of forced him to say it, like,
yeah.
what's going on. And then when he did, I was like, okay, I'm not talking to you again. It's, over. And he called and was like, well, I don't know which one of you to pick, or I don't know, which, well, she has this and you have this. I just don't know. And it's like, you've already picked the person,
Yeah. Right.
so you don't, he's like, well, we can still be friends if you need anything, I always want to be there for you. And it's like, no, you're, I won't be your backup supply.
Correct. Right. Yeah, I mean, my narc, he was very adamant about, his choice. And I think for him, it was more so like, because originally he had a girlfriend and lied and told me that he was single.
Mm,
But once I found out he was single, I was single. I think because he wanted me to be the side chick. And then maybe, I don't know, he was going to upgrade me to be the first girlfriend.
hmm
But I think he was hurt and he wanted to get payback on me for rejecting him, like in the beginning, although we was dating. But I think he was like, okay, well, if she's not going to be my side chick, then I'm going to get her back. You know how narcissists plot on you.
hmm
And so I think all that time he was future faking me and kind of getting me, leading me up to the disappointment and the letdown, which they really enjoy you going through that. But when I saw the post on social media, basically saying he was in a relationship, and I'm thinking like, well, he's not with me, so
Yeah.
who is it, And so I didn't know he was a narc. I had reached out to him. I'm like, hey, how's everything going? And it's funny because he was like, oh, you must have seen my social media, huh? And I'm like, yeah. And he was like, did I kill your dreams? And I'm like, what do you mean by that? And well, actually, no, I didn't say, what do you mean by that? I was just like, no, you didn't. Right.
hmm
But in actuality, he did,
mm
and I didn't want to tell him that. I didn't want to give him that satisfaction. And so, but just looking back, I'm like, he was really trying to hurt me. That was his intentions. He wanted me to hurt. And I did for a while, because I had been looking at the narcissist page and I was comparing myself to the new supply because he never showed me off. He never introduced me to like his family, certain friends of his, but never like people that was close to him. And so I don't know, I felt less than, and I felt really hurt. And I just felt like he enjoyed me being hurt. And I felt like that wasn't something that I wanted. I didn't want to have him around me anymore because I felt like he was intentionally trying to make me upset. So
Yeah. They definitely try to make you upset. And I know in my situation, he would always do things where he would say people would say things about me and he stood up for me. But, I've never heard those people say those things. So it's like you don't even know if those people even said that he's
right.
just like, hey, look at me, protecting you, but he's not doing any of that. And I remember, one time he's like, well, and we were also long distance because we went to different schools. But he was just like, oh, I bought a ring, but a wedding ring, but since we're having so many issues, I took it back, and stuff like that. And then even when we did get back together, it was on his always on his terms.
Right.
He would just be like, well, I see you've grown, and his was also a lot of spiritual abuse in his
Mm,
as well, because he would
okay.
be like, well, I've seen you've grown in the Lord, and we can be together now, and we should be together now. But anytime like I did something that he didn't like, that's when he'd be like, well, I think we should break up again. And
Mm,
so it would just be that back and forth until I just realized, like, and it was funny because I was going to school for psychology. And so once we got like to that page about like narcissism and stuff, I was like, wait a second. Like he's doing like gaslighting me, doing all of the characteristics of a narc. And I
yeah.
need to, and it's crazy because looking back, like I did like the classic, well, like, oh, okay, I know what's going on with him now. I can help him instead
Right.
of just, being like, let me just leave him alone.
Yeah.
And so that it's just crazy, like just being in the moment. And I even, tried to tell him, you're a narc, right? Or you're abusive. And he would, come back with, well, if you're abusive, why are you with me? And stuff like
Mm.
that. That's just like this makes you like doubt yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, and what's crazy is like I feel like a lot of them know that they're narcissists or they're toxic, they're unhealthy, and some of them I even know like they think you deserve it. The longer that we're with them, the
hmm
longer that we put up with the abuse, a lot of them feel like that we deserve the treatment that they're dishing out to us because we stayed for so long and we want to change them, and we want to see the good in everybody, right? But yeah, I've come to learn that a lot of them actually think that we deserve to be treated like that. So it's a pretty sick thing. So yeah.
So, with your relationship, how long would you say it took you to, I guess, feel better or more comfortable after you got out of it?
With my relationship with the male narc, I would say it took me about 2 years. Took me about 2 years to feel okay and feel normal again and not be like bitter and hateful and angry, you know. Now when it comes to my aunt, it took, well, I'd say maybe about 3 years, just because I was still connected to her because she was family.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like I owed a lot to her just because I grew up in Delaware.
Mm-hmm.
But my aunt, she lives in California. She actually still lives there now, but I felt like she helped me in a sense. So I felt almost like guilty,
Mm-hmm.
not talking to her anymore and going no contact. But I had to realize that I wasn't getting anything out of it. And I've always felt like less than. I felt like I couldn't do anything right. And I felt like I wasn't able to be myself. And so I'm like, thinking to myself, like my normal friends, it's like I don't feel that way when I'm around them. Like I feel like I'm okay, like I'm at ease, I'm at peace. But it's like when I'm with my aunt, I just feel like I have to do all this stuff, but it's like I don't feel good. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember even one time she said, well, one time I was upset, and I remember she was like, you don't have to feel that way. Don't feel that way. So it's like she was denying me my right to like feel as a human being. And I just, that's, to me, that's emotional abuse. And I'm just like, I had to think of all that stuff, and just I realized like how controlling she was and
Mm-hmm.
how jealous she was and how she tried to sabotage my relationships, whether it was friends or even guys that I was dating. That helped me to kind of just stay away from her. And I didn't even want to change her, because I know the female, in my personal opinion, I think female narcs are worse than male narcs, which, they're equally abusive, equally toxic, equally harmful. But I just feel like the female ones, they're worse. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I would definitely say, like, with my parents, I didn't, um, my mom, I grew up with my grandparents, thankfully, the majority of my life. So when I did get started living back with my mom, it was like you were saying, she was just controlling. And just all through my childhood, she would do stuff where, she would say, like, oh, your grandma let you do these things, but she wouldn't let me do these things. And so when I was able to do those things, she would like sabotage them. Um, it was one instance where I was on the track team, and she was like, "Oh, I never got a chance to be on the track team." And I went to track practice that morning. One of my guy friends on the track team took me. She knew this. And then later on that night, I went to the movies with a friend that was a girl, and she somehow called my grandma asking where I was. My grandma said I was at the movies. She assumed it was with him. Ironically, this was the guy she wanted me to date, so I don't know why that would have been a problem. But basically, she like harassed him, and it was crazy because everyone was at the same movie. It was so I was actually in the same movie theater as him,
Mhm.
but she basically called him and was like, bring Takesha back home. I'm going to call the police saying that, you kidnapped her, like all this crazy stuff. And then the next morning, the next like week at school, of course, everyone knew about it. And then she apparently had talked to a track coach about it. And the track coach was just like, well, I didn't know she had talked to the track coach. So when we had our next meetup, the track coach was like, "Well, I don't like when parents, come and talk to me about stuff that don't have anything to do with track." And looking at me, and I'm just like embarrassed. So I quit the track team. And
Oh,
it's, you know, so she just did a lot of stuff like that where she would do stuff purposely, like you said, to sabotage me or control me. And once I got like 18 and went to school, Like I like no contact her. The only reason I talk to her now, and it's I just started talking to her last year after 5 years of no contact. She didn't even come to my wedding because I just was no contact with her
Wow.
altogether.
Mm,
Because she would have taken she it would have been her wedding,
right.
and
Yeah.
so I was like, no, I can't have it. The only reason I've talked to her now is because the pandemic happened. And I just want to, make sure she was okay. But I still, hold her at a just a far place. Like
Right.
we have to have these boundaries. Like she doesn't even know where I live. Like I go see her, but
Right.
she
Yeah.
should not know where I live. And it's like it's sad you have to be that way, but you have to, put boundaries on them.
You have to. Because if you don't, then, you're putting your mental health, psychological health, emotional health at risk. I mean, they don't care. It's all about them. They're very selfish, and yeah, it's sick, but that's unfortunate. That's how it has to be.
I definitely know with like the guy Narc, it ended up being where his emotional and abusive, the psychological everything. I have lupus now,
Oh,
and I feel like, which I don't want to give him too much credit because he already does, but that's the stress of like dealing with all of that. I really feel like elevated that to a point where it became active. And even when like he found out I had lupus, like I told him or whatever, he was like, well, you probably have it because you did something to someone that's a high regard to God. He was like, I'm
what?
not saying it was me, but you did something, so it's your fault that you got it because you did
Mm.
something that you did something to one of God's chosen people. Like he said like that. And that's just like how that's just crazy.
Yeah.
And so it's just crazy. I definitely don't have any, I don't know. That's just a crazy situation where he even to this day, like he will
Internet
say,
connection.
huh?
Oh, no, I think the internet connection. When I was gonna ask, the lupus is
Oh,
that curable? How do you manage that?
it's not curable, but I just manage it with my medication and just not being, stressed as
Okay.
like possible. And it's definitely better than where it was because when I got it, I had to go like into the ER and almost for almost died, and it was just a crazy situation.
Oh no. Well, I'm happy that you're managing it. That's great.
Yes, thank
Uh,
you. I
yeah, you're welcome.
I just feel like he definitely did play a big part in that. And even I don't know, it was just a lot of back and forth during that time. And for me it was like after all of it, it did take me a long time because overall it had been like 10 years really interacting with him. So I would say it probably took me like 4 or 5 years to actually be like okay with myself again.
Mm, yeah. And sometimes it can take that long. I always tell people, like, don't rush your healing process because everybody heals at their own pace. It's no rush. So yeah.
So, what were some of like your coping skills during the time after breaking up or dealing with him?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. Like, I really went out of my way to kind of find out what happened to me.
Hmm.
I did a lot of research, searching what narcissist was. I really leaned on the people that I trusted and the people that I knew cared about me the most. I spent a lot of time with them. I would even share with them what happened. And, they were very supportive, very loving. I thank God every day for the people that were my friend. Well, still today are my friends. I would say just a handful because some people, you got to be careful.
Yeah.
Um, But the other thing was, I really started to focus on myself. I had to really get centered in the now, although all of that abuse did occur, but I had to focus on what was most important to me, and I had to get centered. And so I started to focus on things that I used to be interested in
Mm.
before I met the narc,
Mm-hmm.
like goals and dreams and hobbies that interest me, like music or, you know, um, what was it, like yoga. I started to dive deep into yoga, meditating, and that really, I think, was what helped me kind of save my life, really, because I was able to kind of get out and move my body, and I didn't have to think too much about the narcissist and what he was doing. I wasn't as obsessed. I started to read a lot of books about self-love and self-esteem and self-value, knowing my worth and knowing my value, for my next relationship, and kind of building my confidence and my sense of self back up, right? And then I started to educate myself about PTSD and
Mm-hmm.
childhood traumas, and talking to my parents, like forgiving them, forgiving myself. Yeah, I forgave the narc, but of course I would never go back, right?
Yeah.
And then I had to grieve. I
Mm-hmm.
had to cry a lot. I had to let it out. A lot of us, not all, but some of us, I think we can kind of be scared to go to that point in our life where we just deal with ourselves. We sit with how we're
Yeah.
feeling,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to go through it, because I felt like if I didn't, I wouldn't be where I'm at now, and I
Mm-hmm.
would still be holding on to all that
Yeah.
baggage, not allowing myself to be happy and not allowing myself to move on. And I felt like I deserved that. Um, and just giving myself time to just to grieve. And I didn't try to move on so quick. I was able to spend some time by myself, although yeah, from time to time I did go out on a few dates, but I knew like that wasn't going anywhere
Yeah.
because I wasn't healed.
Mm-hmm.
um but yeah, that's pretty. Oh, and then learning about the cognitive dissonance, and
Mm-hmm.
just things that we struggle with, codependencies, and addictions and abandonment issues,
Yeah.
fearing of being alone, fear of being by myself, and fear of not being able to take care of myself, always looking for outside approval, being addicted to love, and comparing myself to people all the time. I really had to just deal with joy. Like that was really kind of what helped me cope. But the other thing too was I did reach out for support, so it was kind of like a little professional help. The
Mm-hmm.
only thing that I wish I would have did was I wish I would have talked to someone that dealt with narcissistic abuse,
Mm-hmm.
because the person that I did talk to, she was kind of, I think she was like a counselor in training. So like
Mm-hmm.
we talked for a year, which was cool. I was able to kind of vent, and I was able to get my feelings out, but she didn't really experience it. So I
Yeah.
felt like she didn't really understand me. So like when we were talking, I felt like she was just staring at me like, oh, like this helpless person. Like, you know what I mean? She went through all
Yeah.
this abuse. Like she sympathized and empathized with me, but it's like she didn't go through it. Like,
Yeah.
so that's the only thing I wish I would have did, like reached out to someone specifically that dealt with narcissistic abuse, because I felt like I could have healed maybe quicker, and maybe I felt like I wouldn't have reached out to the narc. I would have been thinking like, okay, you don't reach out to a person that's hurt you,
Yeah.
because they're a source of pain, not a source of your happiness. And I think that's a lot of us, it's hard for us to understand that, because we're so used to the narc being our source of happiness, but we got to remember they're the source of our pain. And I
Yeah.
felt like when I was thinking about the narc, I think I was hurting so much, because I was like, well, they were my happiness,
Mm-hmm.
but I had to shift my mind. I had to change my mind about that. So that was definitely some of the coping skills that I had to kind of work on after dealing with all the abuse. So
I think it's really great, like you said, that you had to just focus on allowing yourself to cry and allowing yourself to like go through the pain. Because, like you said, for I feel like a lot of us just, so we go through trauma and we're just like, okay, it happened and I'm going to move on and that's it. And we never like fully process it and actually sit in it. So I think that's really good. And that's like what you have to do, even if it's not in that moment, even if it's like years later, you have to like understand this happened to me, cry about it, yell about it, scream about it, do whatever to like understand like this happened and it's okay to express sadness or anger or whatever about it, not just be like this happened and I just have to push it aside or not do anything
Yeah.
about it. I
Right.
think um I think for me, like it was just very traumatic because for me, I thought, ultimately I was going to marry this person. I thought, he was going to be like my, husband. And I guess for me, the this crazy part about it was that he, I don't know, even in the beginning, just said or seemed like he was my soulmate, that we were, connected. We were just soulmates. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah, I was just typing in the chat.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
I can hear you. No, you're fine. Go ahead.
I was just saying, like he, even from the beginning, just said that like we were soulmates, and we, I guess, got together so young that it just made sense, at the time. But it was definitely a struggle to heal from him. It was like very depressing times, very honestly sometimes suicidal times. Um, because like you said, the codependence part, like I was like, what am I without, him? And so it was just very hard to figure out like what I even liked again, because I did photography at the time too, when he would be so judgmental of like my photography, and that, I would go to school and my peers be like, oh, I like it, it was this. He'd be like, oh, that's too whatever, or that's too, and it's like, what, looking back, it's like nothing was wrong with it. You just didn't want me to be happy. You didn't want me to be happy.
Right.
It
Yeah.
didn't have anything to do with you. And so, and also for me, I just had to learn who God was again, because I I would say both of us, he kind of took on, the narc kind of took on my Jesus role per se. Like I would, I guess find my relationship to God through him instead of Jesus. And so I just had to focus on like who God was to me and Jesus was to me, and who I was as a person. And so it was just definitely a struggle, and definitely, took a very long time. But I definitely agree with you, where if there was people at the time that professionally could talk, because I went to like therapy and we talked about like abandonment and stuff, but we didn't really talk about narcissistic issues. And so like you were saying, if it was were people where they would actually understand or have been through the situation, it would have felt more like, okay, they really understand how, you can't just be like, well, just forget about them, or just
Yeah.
like, it's like, no, because it's just a back and forth for
Yeah.
so long. So I
Yeah.
definitely wish it was people back then that could have helped in that aspect.
Yeah. And I love how, like, and I forgot to mention, God, of course, was, I mean, I grew up in the church, like car seat baby,
Hmm.
and I didn't really understand God, like, when I was literally going to church like every like week. But I felt like when I had the narcissistic relationships, I felt like God was kind of pushing me towards him, because I felt like, yeah, I was alone, but not like really alone, because I had God with me.
Hmm.
And I felt from the day that I went no contact, I was like, I'm gonna be okay. Like I like something just came over me. I was like, I'm gonna be fine. Like, and I actually went through an experience where when I was no contact with my, well, actually no, I wasn't no contact with my aunt, but I was understanding that was something was wrong. I was
Hmm.
still in contact with the narc, and there was a period of time in my life where I was living in my car. I was living in my car for about a month. My friends, the friends that I knew were really my friend, they knew what was going on. And the good thing was I did have a place that was ready.
Hmm.
I was going to be moving in. I think it was like maybe a week or two. But I had to stay in my car because I didn't want to go back living with my aunt, because I knew it was something was wrong. And I also had other friends that I had went to school with, and they was like, yeah, Joy, like you don't want to go back living with your aunt, because they had actually witnessed her and
Mm-hmm.
saw like how mean she was, and just not welcoming at all, very unpleasant, but looks so good and always talking about all the stuff that she has, and it's all about her.
Mm-hmm.
um but yeah, it was a scary thing staying in my car, and I played it so well. I did. Nobody knew. I mean, if you were to look at me, and because I would be in Starbucks all the time, and I'd be doing online work, and
Mm-hmm.
I had my way of getting food and stuff, which I feel so grateful. But I will tell you this: there was one night, I was in my car, and I remember I cried like a baby, like I was bawling, crying, and I'm like, God, like I want my place. I need my place. I don't want to be in this car anymore. And the other reason why I was in the car was because the girl that I was staying with, her and I, we kind of got into it because she was controlling.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't want me to move out on my own. She wanted me to
Mm-hmm.
stay with her. I was sleeping on the couch, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, you girl, you can stay here, like don't worry about it, you don't need to get your own place, and this and this and that. And prior to that, I had given my aunt back her key because she was trying to get me to go back and live with her. She was like, are you sure, you want to give me the key? She was trying to do the whole guilt and fear
Yeah.
tactic. It didn't work. So I said, you can have your key, and that was that. But the next day though, after I finished balling out, there was this lady that had came up to me, and this was before, because what I would usually do is I would go and wash up in Starbucks, get cleaned up, and then do my routine, and then by that later on that night I would clean up and then go and stay in my car.
Mm-hmm.
And so this lady walks up to me and she's like, are you homeless? And I was like, no. And she was like, are you sure? And I was like, actually, yeah. But I told her, I was like, well, I have my place that I'm going to be moving into very soon. So I was like, it's in the works. And she was like, okay, as long as you have that going. And I was like, yeah. And she was like, I understand. I've been in a similar predicament, because she was saying she wanted her own place, and then the environment that she was in, it wasn't, she didn't like it, and she just felt like she was ready, but she felt like she had to go through a test. Maybe God was testing her to see, like, are you going to be able to overcome this? And I felt like that's what I went through. But it's funny because she was like, oh, well, did you need anything, like,
Mm-hmm.
any money or anything like that? I'm like, well, if you have it, I mean, I'm open to it. And so she gave me $40 and $1 bills, so $40.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, thank you so much. And she was just like, here, take it. Like, don't worry about paying me back. Just, do what you got to do. And she was like, give me your number. She was like, once you move into your house or your apartment, like, let me know so I know that you're
Mm-hmm.
safe. And I was like, okay. But it was funny because from that moment forward, I was like, there has to be a God out there, that wants me to be successful and that wants me to be safe. Because
Mm-hmm.
in that moment, I felt so safe. I was so fearful. I was like, why am I doing this to myself? But I felt like I had to go through that because I feel like that was the test for me, and I'm just grateful that I found myself and I found God in that sense. And the relationship that I have with God now is just, he's like my best friend. He's everything. I talk to him every morning, every night. I'm always speaking affirmations of things that I want to manifest in my life. And it's not always, it comes so quick. Like, again, God's got to test you to see if, he can put his trust in you.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's just another way I feel like if I didn't have the narcissism in my life, I feel like I probably wouldn't be so close to God. So it's kind of like it was a gift and a curse. So
I definitely
yeah,
get that. I definitely understand that because I don't know, it it's kind of like you said, it's kind of weird because it's like I don't want to give credit to them, but at the
right.
same time, it's the trauma and everything that we went through that pushed us to where we needed to be with God. I know it's especially for like me when I did talk to the narc, like after like the situation, like years later, um, it was, he he just was like, oh, this is, amazing. Like I can hear, you're closer to God. And I'm like, yes, not to you. So good
Right.
day. But it was pretty crazy with my narc. Like it was after I found out he had a girlfriend, it was like no contact for 6 years. Um,
Mm,
because I was like, I don't want to have anything to do with you at all. And I was moving back to our hometown to Memphis, and I think he had moved back. And when I told him I was moving back, he was just like, "No, you can't move back. Like you can't, move back. Because if I see you, then I'm gonna choose you." All this crazy stuff. But 6 years went by, and I had no contact at all, no nothing. And randomly one day on Facebook, he contacted me, and he just was like, "Hey, how are you?" And I saw it, and I was like, what in the world is going on? And I had looked on his Facebook, and I think he still had like his pictures with his girlfriend. But I didn't respond his message. And then I think like a month later, he was like, "I was just trying to see if you're alive." And I looked on his Facebook, and all remnants of his girlfriend were like gone.
mm,
And
mm.
it was just like, he was like, "Well," and then unfortunately Facebook told him that I saw the message. So he was
Oh,
like, "Oh, I see you're alive. That's all I wanted." or
wow.
And it was just crazy because, like, 6 years I haven't talked to you, and then you break up with this girl or whatever happens, and then you contact me, and it's just like, one, are you alive? Why would I not be alive because I haven't talked to you? And
Right.
then, two, obviously you're reaching out because your supply is gone. So you're like, let me go back to my first supply and see what's going on there. See what's going on. So it was just a crazy situation. And he reached out a couple more times, and I was just like, "Well, I forgive you for, everything you did." And he was like, "What are you talking about?"
Wow.
He was like, "What are you talking about?" And I just was like, "Anyway."
Yeah. They really, they're gaslighters, and they don't accept any accountability, no responsibility for anything that they do. It's all our fault. And that's just something that I don't accept that in my life at all. That's a red flag. And if there's anybody in my life that I know, or someone may ask me about somebody that's in our, I'll tell them the truth.
Mhm,
I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I think I've learned, to be more assertive now,
mhm.
and yeah, I don't have time for that.
Yeah, I definitely say with my family members, like my mom and dad, I don't, I'm more assertive with them, and more like, I'm not doing this, or this is my boundaries. Or even other people. I had a situation where someone, I got married, and so they were going to come to my wedding, but some stuff happened where they just changed their mind, and they, had it. I'm trying to say it so if they hear this, they're not like it's me. Uh, um, but they changed their mind, and they, were adamant about telling me they changed their mind, thinking I would be like, "Oh, I'd be sad," or like, "Oh," I was just like, "Okay, if that's what you want to do, that's fine." And that,
Yeah.
of course, that made them even more angry.
Even
But
more,
it's like,
yeah.
I'm going to be indifferent. I'm going to be,
Got to.
going to not engage because this is clear. This is what you want me to do. So I'm going to not do that because it's not, I'm not going to be, feed you. I'm not going to be your supply.
Right.
So, I've just learned to, take up more for myself and be, indifferent, or do, what I have to do. And even like when I did break it off with the narc the last time, like, uh right before we broke up, I mean, when he had the girlfriend, that was a whole different thing. But right before that, like 2 years later, I mean, earlier, we were dating, and I broke up with him. I was so adamant and so like hardcore in that situation. And then, like, I don't know, something happens where, like, you be like, is it like, it wasn't my fault? What did I do? And it's like, I'm the one that broke up with him, but you want to be back with them. And so that's, I think how we end up talking again. And then he had a girlfriend and stuff. But I remember in that part of that time, I kept going back and forth, like, why were you so mean to him? And I think we, always do
Yeah,
that. Like, why are we mean to them and we can't see like they're abusive?
exactly.
So we're not being mean, we're standing up for ourselves.
Standing up. Yeah, we got to. Because if we don't, no one else will, you know?
Yeah. And I definitely remember with my narc, even though we were going to, and that's the thing people might not understand either. Like, even though you're not even in the same location as them, they unfortunately have so much power.
Yeah.
And it's just, he would not want me to have certain friends or not want me to go different places. And at the time, like, it didn't make sense, and I wouldn't be like, oh, I'm getting rid of these friends. I would sometimes not hang out with them as much, but I wouldn't just like throw all of them away. It was just a crazy situation overall.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely crazy.
So so what do you do now? Are you able to coach people or?
Yeah, I do coach, the victims and the survivors of narcissistic abuse. I also, coach people that just need mental, emotional support as well when it comes to relationships and dating, just because I have a lot of experience in that as well,
Mhm.
like post narc or even before narc. But yeah, I do coach, and I do have courses that talk about, dealing with narcissists, how to overcome narc abuse, and healing and recovering, and how to avoid narcissistic relationships in the future. So
That's good. I feel like it's always good that we can use what we went through to help other people and help them understand where they are and just help them get back on track with themselves. So, I guess this is a question like I ask everyone. Do you feel like a narcissistic person can change, can actually change?
I get that question a lot. From my experience, now other people may have different experiences, but from what I've seen, no. There are small, like small cases where the narc may potentially change, in case that there's like a midlife crisis
Mhm.
or something like really bad happens to them. It's like a health issue or something like that, maybe. But then they may revert back to their
After
old
they back on
you
top.
know yeah, so but I would say no. But I do feel like, a lot of us victims and survivors, we do hold out on hope, because some of us, we really did love them. I thought that I loved my narc that I dealt with, but I felt like I loved a lie. I loved
Mhm.
their false self,
Mhm.
and that was hurtful to me. And um I thought that, when he did reach back out to me or tried to hoover me, that he was like changed, or that he realized the error in his ways, or that he wanted to quote unquote be with me, but he, in actuality, that wasn't his intentions anyway. But once I realized that the narcissist could not change, or they didn't want to change, because some of them don't think that there's anything wrong with them, you
Mhm.
know, that's when I was able to be like, okay, like I'm good. Like I don't need to be dealing with this kind of person. I deserve better,
Yeah.
so.
I definitely agree. I definitely agree that, in my opinion as well, that they cannot change.
Right.
I just agree. Like, if it's like something that is severe enough, they will change for that moment. But once they're back, successful or on top or have another supply, then they'll be right back to their ways. And so I feel like that's kind of like the love bombing stage, kind of with them, where they would see, like, oh, okay, I have to do something to grab someone or to grab attention, and then I can be back on top. So I feel like they don't change and they won't change. So I feel like it's very hard. Like I don't really think they can at all.
Yeah, and I would say especially for those of us that we want to help people, we want to quote unquote fix people. Some of us we may have addictions to fixing people. I know I did. I struggle with that, or trying to always see the good in people. There's nothing wrong with that, but you have to be mindful because not everybody wants to be good. Some people want
Yeah.
to be evil, and that's cool, but don't be evil around me. I'm not going to allow that in my energy.
Yeah.
And so yeah, just happen to just kind of just accept it for what it is, not lying to myself, not, believing in the illusion which narcissists present to us, and they want us to believe that. But it's just like you got to be real. You got to be real with yourself.
I think you have to be real with yourself, and even like you were saying, you have to be real with yourself sometimes, where even where other people, I would definitely say they're enablers, don't believe you. I know, unfortunately, like in my situation, I did reach out to like a few of his friends, like when stuff was like, this is what's happening and you all don't see it. And
Hmm.
obviously they would take his side or be like, oh, this just the way he is, or they wouldn't believe it. And it would just be, you know like, okay, that's out of control. Like, okay,
Yep.
fine. So just be real, with yourself. And my situation, it was very odd because even, after the 6 years and he contacted me and stuff, I was at a music concert with me and my husband, and he was there.
Mm,
And um I saw him. I didn't say anything to him. And then he started like physically hovering around us,
mm,
and I still didn't say anything. And then his birthday came up, and me being nice, I was just like, "Happy birthday!" Since it saw. Well, actually, at the concert, he finally came up and talked to us instead of circling us, because I was not going to say anything. And so after that, I was like, okay, I guess we're on good terms, and I have a husband, so it doesn't, it's not going to be like weird. So I
yeah.
just reached out and was like, "Happy birthday, good to see you, whatever." And his response was not like a thank you. It was like, "Oh, you still love me because you didn't reach out to me at the concert. I had to. You saw me, but I had to come speak to you first." And that was just very heartbreaking. Not heartbreaking, but what did he say? He said that was just really rude of you. You were rude not to speak to
Mhm.
me first when you saw me. And it's just like, I don't have to speak to you.
Right. Exactly.
I don't have to speak to you. Or if you come close to me, I still don't have to speak to you. And that's not being rude or me being scared. I just don't. I haven't seen you in like 6 years, so
Right.
it's, I'm not gonna be like, "Hey, this is my husband and me. How you doing? Great to see you." Gonna be
Yeah.
like, "Whoa," you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. It's funny. Thank goodness I moved away from where the narc that I used to talk to, I think he's still in LA. But I noticed whenever my birthday would come around, I
Mhm,
noticed he never said happy birthday to me. And I thought that that was so weird because I'm like, if he's like, we're dating, we're quote unquote friends and all that stuff, wouldn't he say like happy birthday? But on other times, like he would say like happy Thanksgiving or he'll say like happy New Year's, but he never said like
mhm,
happy birthday to me. And I remember I would always say like happy birthday to him.
mhm,
But what's funny is recently, my birthday was in May,
mhm,
and I have a LinkedIn page, and I don't know if you know, but LinkedIn page is sometimes you can see when people view your profile.
mhm,
And a lot of narcissists will try to hoover you or just try to see like if you would like kind of, reach out to them or just give them just a little bit of supply, right?
mhm.
So I saw that he viewed my profile, my LinkedIn profile, and it was so weird because I haven't heard from him since 2014. I'm like,
Hmm.
how the heck did he find my LinkedIn profile? And I'm
Mhm.
just like, that is just so creepy. Like they're always watching, or they're searching for you, trying to find out what you're doing. Thank goodness he didn't message me. Thank
Mm,
goodness. But I went on his profile, so he probably saw that I did, but I'm just like, what is he looking at my page for? So
mhm.
I just thought that was interesting. But that was recent. But he probably was thinking that I was gonna like say something to him because it was my birthday time, and they know a lot of us were in good moods
Mm,
around our birthdays or certain like holiday occasions. They would do
yeah,
stuff like that to try to hoover you. So I'm just happy that I didn't take the bait, or I wasn't curious, because a lot of us were like curious. We were like, oh, how that person doing? And
yeah.
I think that's what he was trying to get me to do, but I didn't do it. So
Speaking of that, like right when right when I got married, he had I think he had reached out. That's around the time, like 3 or so months before, he had reached out, like, "Are you alive?" and all that foolishness. And then on my Facebook, I had changed it to engaged, and so he was like, "Congratulations! I saw this in my dreams," and all this stuff or whatever. And so he had reached. So this is the like he said, they reach out to try to get you to reach out, or they do stuff. So when I had a best friend when me and him were dating, but I was no longer talking to her during my getting married time. Like, we hadn't talked in a while. So she told me this, like, maybe 2 years after I got married and we were talking. She was like, the time period when you were getting married, the narc had reached out to her on Facebook, and he was pretending to reply to a message she had sent him 6 years ago, like, "Oh, you're a great friend," thinking that she would be like, "Hey, he reached out to me." So I would be like, "Why are you reaching out to her?" or something like that. But it backfired because I wasn't talking to her. So I
mhm.
didn't know that he had reached out. And so,
Yeah,
like you were saying, then, like, reach out to just do stuff to be like, "Hey, look at me," so you can reach out to them. But I would definitely say, when I came back to our town, it was hard for me to even feel like going out the house. I
yeah,
just was so, like, scared I would, like, run into him or see him, or like it would be stuff that we did like in common. So I'd be like, I can't go to this concert because he would be there, or I can't do this because he might be there. And so I feel like, definitely, come back to what you're saying, just becoming yourself again. I had to get to the point of being like, oh, whatever. If
yeah,
he's there, he's there. Like, if I run into him, I'm running to him. Like, I don't have to be afraid to live again.
right. Exactly. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So yeah, I just think that it's our birthright to be happy. It's our birthright to live our life to our fullest potential. And I just think that the narcissist can be an obstacle, whether it's a parent, friend, romantic partner. And that's just something that we got to overcome. And doesn't happen overnight. But if you want better for yourself, and you know your worth and your value, I think it'll come in due time. So I would just think a person should just be patient and just know what you're dealing with. And I think once you know, then you can know how to handle a person. So
Yeah, I think you're exactly right about that.
yes, indeed. So
But it was nice meeting you and having a
yes.
conversation with you.
Yes, it was awesome. And I appreciate you for sharing, and that was awesome. So, and
Yeah,
thank
you
you for
too.
having me.
Yeah, you as well. I will definitely figure out how to send this to you.
Okay.
The recording. So I should be able to. So you'll
Okay.
have it as well.
Okay, cool.
All right, but you have a good day and good
You too.
night. And
Yeah.
we'll talk again.
Yes, take care.
All right, bye bye.
Bye.